I will set this up to be automatic over Wednesday and Thursday, I promise. Alright. I'm gonna take a big sip of Wawa and put my glasses on. Also, a friendly reminder, favorite friends in the chat, do not be afraid to hit that like button. It helps boost the stream. Like the stream. Alright. Water has been consumed. Okay. Putting on the voice of good readers. Chapter 2. We're starting off with Jill's perspective. Hopefully she finally made it to work. Jill was deeply relieved to hear the sounds of Wesker's voice as she jogged towards the open door of the STARS office. She had seen one of their helicopters taking off as she arrived, and had been positive that they left without her. The STARS were a fairly casual outfit in some respects, but there also wasn't any room for people who couldn't keep up, and she very much wanted to be in on this case from the beginning. The RPD has already established a perimeter search spanning sectors 1, 4, 7, and 9. Its essential zones were connected with, and Bravo will set down here. At least she wasn't too late. Wesker always ran meetings the same way. Update speech, theory, then Q&A. Jill took a deep breath and stepped into the office. Wesker was pointing to a posted map on the front of the room, dotted with colored tags, where the bodies had been found. He hardly faltered in his speech as she walked quickly to her desk, feeling suddenly like she was back in basic training and had showed up late for class. Chris Redfield threw her a half-smile as she sat down, and she nodded back at him before focusing on Wesker. She didn't know any of the raccoon team that well, but Chris had made a real effort to make her feel welcomed since she arrived. After a flyby of the other central areas, once they report in, we'll have a better idea of where to focus our energies. But what about the Spencer place? Chris asked. It's practically in the middle of the crime scene. If we start there, we can conduct a more complete search. And if Bravo's information points to that area, rest assured, we'll search there. But for now, I don't see any reason to consider it a priority. I'm turning the music down just a crumb. It's a little loud in my ear. Chris looked incredulous. But we only have Umbrella's word that the estate is secure. Wesker leaned against his desk, his strong features expressionless. Chris, we all want to get to the bottom of this, but we have to work as a team, and the best approach here is to do a thorough search for the missing hikers before we start jumping to conclusions. Bravo will take a look-see, and we'll conduct this by the book. Chris frowned, but said nothing more. Jill resisted the urge to roll her eyes at Wesker's little speech. He was doing the right thing, technically, but he had left out the part about it being political to do as Chief Irons wanted. Irons had made it clear time and time again throughout the killing spree that he was in charge of the investigation and was calling the shots. It wouldn't have bothered her so much except that Wesker presented himself as an independent thinker, a man who doesn't play politics. She had joined the STARS because she couldn't stand the bull crap red tape that dominated so much of the law enforcement. So Wesker's obvious deferral to the chief was irritating. Well, don't forget that you stood a good chance for ending up in prison if you hadn't changed your occupation. Jill, I see that you managed to find the time to come in, illuminate us with your brilliant insight. What have you got for us? Jill met Wesker's sharp gaze evenly, trying to seem as cool as composed as he was. Nothing new, I'm afraid. The only obvious pattern is location. She looked down at the notes she had in the stack of files in front of her, scanning them for reference. The tissue samples under both Becky McGee and Chris Smith's fingernails are the exact match. We got that yesterday. And Tanya Lipton, the third victim, had definitely been hiking in the foothills. That'd be Sector 7B? She looked back up at Wesker and made her pitch. My theory at this point is that there's possibly a ritualistic cult hiding in the mountains, 4 to 11 members strong, with guard dogs trained to attack intruders in their territory. Extrapolate. He said extrapolate. What the heck is that? I mean, I know that means, like, go into more detail, but does anybody use the word extrapolate? He folded his arms, waiting. At least no one laughed. Jill plunged forward, warming to the material. The cannibalism and dismemberment suggest ritualistic behavior, as does the presence of decomposed flesh found on some of the victims, like the killers are carrying parts of previously unknown victims to their attack. We've got saliva and tissue samples from 4 separate human assailants, though eyewitnesses' reports suggest up to 10 or 11 people, and those killed by animals were all found to be attacked in the same vicinity, suggesting that they wandered into some kind of off-limits area. The saliva traces appear to be canine, though there's still some disagreement. She trailed off, finished. Wesker's face betrayed nothing, but he nodded slowly. Not bad at all. Disprove? Jill sighed. She hated having to shoot her own theory down, but that was part of the job. In all honesty, the part that most encouraged clear, rational thinking. The stars trained their people not to fixate on a single path of truth. She glanced at her notes again. It's highly unlikely that a cult that big would move around so much. And we would have seen signs before now. Some escalation to this kind of behavior. Also, the level of post-mortem violence indicates disorganized offenders, and they usually work solo. Joseph Frost, the Alpha Vehicle Specialist, piped up. From the back of the room. The animal attack part works, though, protecting their territory and all. Wesker scooped up a pen and walked to the dryboard easel next to his desk, talking as he moved. I agree. He wrote territorial on the board and then turned to face Jill. Anything else? Jill shook her head, but it felt good that she contributed something. She knew the cult aspect was reaching, but it had been all she'd come up with. The police certainly hadn't come up with anything better. Wesker turned his attention to Brad Victors, who suggested that it was a new strain of terrorism and that their demands would be made soon. Wesker put terrorism on the board, but didn't seem enthusiastic about the idea. Neither did anyone else. Brad quickly went back into his headset, checking on the Bravo team's status. Both Joseph and Barry passed on theorizing. Chris' views on the killing were already well known. If vague, he believed that there was an organized assault going on and that the external influences were involved somehow. Wesker asked if he had anything new to add, stressing new, Jill noticed, and Chris shook his head, looking depressed. Aw, man, nobody believes him. Wesker put the cap on the black pen and sat at the edge of his desk, gazing thoughtfully at the blank expanse of board. It's a start, he said. I know you've all read the police and coroner reports and listened to the eyewitness accounts. Victor's here. Over. From the back of the room, Brad spoke quietly into the headset, interrupting Wesker. The captain lowered his voice and continued. Now, at this point, we don't know what we're dealing with. I know that all of us have some concerns with how RPD has been dealing with the situation, but now that we're on the case, What? At the sound of Brad's raised voice, Jill turned towards the back of the room, along with everyone else. He was standing up, agitated, one hand pressed into the earpiece of his set. "Bravo team, report. Repeat, Bravo team, report." Wesker stood up. "Victors, put it on comm." Brad hit the switch on the console, and the bright, crackling sound of static filled the room. Jill strained to hear human voices amidst the fuzz. But several tense seconds there was nothing. Then, "You copy? Malfunction. We're going to have to..." And then the rest was lost in a burst of static. It sounded like Enrico, the Bravo team leader. Jill chewed at her lower lip and exchanged a worried glance with Chris. Enrico had seemed frantic. They all listened another moment, but there was nothing more than the sound of open air. "Position?" Wesker snapped. Brad's face was pale. "They're in a Sector 22, tail end of C, except I've lost the signal. The transmitter's offline." Jill felt stunned, saw the feeling reflected in the faces of the others. The helicopter transmitter was designed to keep working no matter what. The only way it would shut down is if something big happened. The entire system blanking out or being seriously damaged. Something like a crash. They gasped. Chris felt his stomach in knots as he recognized the coordinates. The Spencer estate. Marnini had said something about malfunction. It had to be a coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. The Bravos were in trouble, and practically on top of the Umbrella Mansion. All of this went through his head in a split second, and then he was standing, ready to move. Whatever happened, the stars took care of their own. Wesker was already in action. He addressed the team and even reached for his keys, heading for the gun safe. "Joseph, take over the board and keep trying to raise them. Victors, warm up the copter and get clearance. I want us ready to fly in 5. The captain unlocked the safe as Brad handed the headset to Joseph and hurried out of the room. The reinforced metal doors swung open, revealing an arsenal of rifles and handguns shelved above boxes of ammo. Wesker turned to the rest of them, his expression as bland as ever, but his voice brisk with authority. "Barry, Chris, I want you to get the weapons into the copper, loaded and secure. Jill, get the vest and the packs and meet us on the roof." He clipped a key off of his ring and tossed it to her. "I'm going to put a call into Irons. Make sure to get us some backup and EMTs down at the barricade," Wesker said. Then blew out sharply. 5 minutes or less, folks. Let's move." Jill left the locker room. Barry grabbed one of the empty duffel bags from the bottom of the gun safe, nodding at Chris. Chris scooped up a second bag, and they started loading in boxes of shells, cartridges, and clips, and Barry carefully handled the weapons, checking each one. Behind them, Joseph again tried hailing the Bravo team to no avail. Chris wondered again about the proximity of the Bravo team's last report's position to the Spencer estate. Was there a connection? And if so, how? Billy worked for Umbrella. They own the estate. "Chief, Wesker, we lost contact with Bravo. I'm taking us in." Chris felt a sudden rush of adrenaline and worked faster, aware that every second counted. It could mean the difference between life and death for his friends and teammates. A serious crash was unlikely. The Bravos would have been flying low, and Forrest was a decent pilot. What about after they'd gone down? Wesker quickly relayed the information to Irons over the phone and then hung up, walking back to join them. I'm going to make sure that our copper is outfitted. Joseph, give it another minute and then turn it over to the boys at the front desk. You can help these two carry the equipment up and I'll see you on top. Wesker nodded to them and hurried out, his footsteps clattering loudly down the hall. He's good, said Barry quietly, and Chris had to agree. It was reassuring to see that their new captain didn't rattle easily. Chris still wasn't sure how he felt about the man personally, but his respect for Wesker's abilities was growing by the minute. Come in, Bravo. Do you copy? Repeat. Joseph patiently went on, his voice tight with strain, his pleas lost to the haze of white static that pulsed out into the room. Now flopping to a new character is Wesker time. Wesker strolled down the deserted hallway through the shabbier of the 2 second-floor waiting rooms, nodding briskly at a pair of uniforms that stood talking about the soda machine. The door to the outside landing had been was a difficult word. Oh no. The door to the outside landing was left open, a faint, humid breeze cutting through the stickiness of the air inside. There was still daylight, but not for much longer. He hoped that wouldn't complicate matters, although he figured it probably would. Wesker took a left and started down the winding corridor that led to the helipad, absently running through a mental checklist. Hailing open procedure, weapons, gear, report. He already knew everything was in order, but went through it again anyway. It didn't pay to get sloppy, and assumptions were the first step down that path. He liked to think of himself as a man of precision, one who had taken all possibilities into account and decided on the best course of action after thoroughly weighing all factors. Control was what was being a competent leader was all about. I could never. But to close this case, he shut the thought down before he can get any further. He knew what had to be done, and there was still plenty of time. All he needed to do was to concentrate now was getting the Bravos back safe and sound. Wesker opened the door at the end of the hall and stepped out into a bright evening, the sun raising I skipped a line. The rising I was like, sun, no. The rising hum of the copter's engine and the smell of machine oil filling his senses. The small rooftop helipad was cooler than inside, partly draped by a shadow of an aging water tower, and empty except for the gunmetal gray Alpha helicopter. For the first time, he wondered what had gone wrong for Bravo. He had Joseph and the rookie check both birds out yesterday, and they seemed fine. All systems go. He dismissed that train of thought as he walked towards the copter, his shadow falling long across the concrete. It didn't matter why, not anymore. What matters what came next. Expect the unexpected. That was the star's motto, although that basically meant to be prepared for anything. Expect nothing. That's what Albert Wesker's motto. A little less catchy, maybe, but infinitely more useful. It virtually guaranteed that nothing would ever surprise him. He stepped up to the open pilot door and got a shaky thumbs up from Victor's. The man looked positively green, and Wesker briefly considered leaving him behind. Chris was licensed to fly, and Victor's had a reputation for choking under the gun. The last thing he needed was for one of his people to freeze up if there was trouble. Then he thought about the lost Bravos and decided against it. This was a rescue mission. The worst Victor's could do would be to throw up on himself if the copter had crashed badly, and Wesker decided he could live with that. He opened the side door, crouched his way into the cabin, doing quick inventory of equipment that lined the walls. Emergency flares, ration kits. He popped the lid on a heavy, dented footlocker behind the benches and looked through basic medical supplies, nodding to himself. They were as ready as they were going to be. Wesker grinned suddenly, wondering what Brian Irons was doing right now. Crapping his pants, no doubt. Wesker chuckled as he stepped back out into the sun-baked asphalt, getting a sudden clear mental image of Chief Irons, his pudgy cheeks red with anger, and crap dribbling down his leg. That's a little gross there, and oddly descriptive. Irons liked to think that he could control everything and everyone around him, and lost his temper when he couldn't, and that made him an idiot. Unfortunately for all of them, he was an idiot with a little bit of power. Wesker checked him out carefully before taking the position in Raccoon City. He knew a few things about Chief Irons that didn't paint him in a particularly positive light. Wow. Hello. Hi, Tempest. How are you? Welcome on in. Grab a seat, get comfy. We're reading a book. Reading a book. I had my thumb on the place, but then I blinked. Oh, he had no intention of using that information, but if Irons attempted to screw things up one more time, Wesker had no qualms about letting that information get out. I hope that you win all of your Tetris games. Good luck! 1. Or at least telling him that I have access to it. It would certainly keep him out of my way. Okay, switching perspectives again. Barry Burton stepped out onto the concrete, carrying the ammo cache, his giant biceps flexing as he shifted his hold on the heavy canvas bag and started for the copter. Chris and Joseph followed, Chris with the sidearms and Joseph lugging a satchel of RPGs. The compact grenade launchers slung over one's shoulder. Wesker marveled at Burton's brute strength as the alphas climbed in and casually set the bag down as though it didn't weigh over 100 pounds. Barry was bright enough, but in the stars, muscle was a definite asset. Everyone else in his squad was in good shape, but compared to Barry, they were pencil necks. As the three of them stored the equipment, Wesker turned his attention to the back door, watching for Jill. He checked his watch and frowns. It had been just under 5 minutes since their last contact with Bravos. They made excellent time. So where the hell was Valentine? He hadn't interacted with her much since she came to Raccoon City, but her file was a rave review. She'd gotten high recommendations from everyone she worked with, and praised by her last captain as highly intelligent and unusual. Claim in a crisis. Oh, unusually calm in a crisis. I don't know what the hell I'm reading, excuse me. She'd have to be with her history. Her father was Dick Valentine, the best thief in the business a couple of decades back. He trained her to follow in his footsteps, and word had it she had done quite well until Daddy had been incarcerated. Prodigy or no, she could stand to buy a decent watch. He silently urged Jill to get her butt into gear and motioned for Victor to start the blades turning. It was time to find out how bad things were out there. Alright, chapter 3. Now, my dad is up. I'm gonna go take a peek at him and then we'll read this chapter. So I will be back in like 2 seconds. Okay, I have returned. Hello. Get myself right back up in the blinky. I made Prince Unit a little snacky. Thank you very much. Okay. So we made it to chapter 3. Woohoo! Chapter 2 is really short. So we've got a whole hour. Ooh, chapter 3 is very long. Okay. Hopefully we speed run any percent, become real good. I believe in us. Okay. My little pillow. Also, thank you for leaving the like. Whoever liked the swim. Chapter 3. Jill turned towards the door of the dim and silent Star's locker room, her hands full of 2 bulging duffel bags. She set them down and quickly pulled her hair back, tucking it into a well-worn black beret. It was really too hot, but it was her lucky hat. She glanced at her watch before hefting the bags, pleased to note that it had only taken her 3 minutes to load up. She'd gone through all of the alpha lockers, grabbing utility belts, fingerless gloves, Kelver vest, and shoulder packs. Noting that the lockers reflected the users' personalities, Barry's locker had been covered with snapshots of his family in a pinup from a gun magazine. A rare 45 lager shining against red velvet. Chris had pictures of his Air Force buddies up on the shelves. Oh, and the shelves were a boyish mess. Crumpled t-shirts, loose papers, even a glow-in-the-dark yo-yo with a broken string. Brad Victor's had a stack of self-help books. Joseph, a Three Stooges calendar. Only Wesker's had been devoid of any personal effects. Somehow, it didn't surprise her. The captain struck her as too tightly wound to place that much value on sentiment. Her own locker held a number of used paperback true crime novels, a toothbrush, floss, breath mints, and 3 hats. On the door was a small mirror and an old, frayed photo of her and her father, taken when she was a child and had gone to the beach one summer. As she quickly thrown the alpha gear together, she decided that she'd redecorate when she had some free time. Anyone through her locker would think that she's some kind of dental freak. Jill crouched a bit and fumbled at the latch to the door, balancing the awkward bags with one raised knee. She grasped it when someone loudly coughed behind her. Startled, Jill dropped the bags and spun, looking for the cough as her mind reflexively assessed the situation. The door had been locked. The small room had 3 banks of lockers, and it had been quiet and dark when she came in. There was another door in the back of the room, but no one had come through it since she entered, which means that somebody was already here when I came in the shadows behind the last bank. cop grabbing a nap? Unlikely. The apartment had a lunchroom and a couple of bunks in the back. A lot more comfortable than a narrow bench over cold concrete. Maybe someone was enjoying a little leisure time in the magazine? Her brain snarled. Does it matter? You're on the clock here. Get moving. Right. Jill scooped up the bags and turned to leave. Miss Valentine, is it? A shadow separated itself from the back of the room, stepped forward. A tall man with a low, musical voice. Early 40s, thin frame, dark hair, deep-set eyes. He was actually wearing a trench coat, and an expensive one at that. Jill readied herself to move quickly if the need arose. She didn't recognize him. That's right, she said warily. The man stepped towards her, smile flickering across his face. I have something for you, he said softly. Jill narrowed her eyes and shifted automatically into a defensive position, balancing her weight on the balls of her feet. Hold it, jerk face. I don't know who the hell you think you are, or what you think I want, but you're in a police station. She trailed off as he shook his head, grinning broadly, his dark eyes twinkling with mirth, whatever that means. You mistake my intentions, Miss Valentine. Excuse my manners. My name is Trent, and I'm a friend to the stars. She studied his posture and positioned and eased her own stance slightly, watching his eyes for even a flicker of movement. She didn't feel threatened by him exactly, but how did he know my name? What do you want? Trent grinned wider. Straight to the point. But of course, you are on a rather tight schedule. He slowly reached into his pocket of his coat and pulled out what looked like a cell phone. Though it's not what I want that's important, it's what I think you should have. Jill glanced at the item he held, frowns. That? Yes. I assembled a few documents that you should find interesting. Compelling, in fact. As he spoke, he held out the device. She reached for it carefully, realizing as she did, it was a mini disc reader. Guys, I'm blind. Help me. A very complicated and costly microcomputer. Trent was well financed, whoever he was. She said, that man got money. Ooh, baller. Jill tucked the reader into her hip pack, suddenly more than a little curious. Who do you work for? He shook his head. That's not what's important. Not at this juncture. Although I will say there's a lot of very important people watching Raccoon City right now. Oh, and are those people friends of the stars too, Mr. Trent? Trent laughed, a soft, deep chuckle. So many questions, so little time. Read the files, and if I were you, I wouldn't mention this conversation to anyone. It could have rather serious consequences. He walked towards the door in the back of the room, turning back to her as he reached for the knob. Trent's lined, weathered features suddenly lost all trace of humor, his gaze serious and intense. One more thing, Miss Valentine, and this is critical. Make no mistake. Not everyone can be trusted, and not everyone is who they appeared to be, even the people you think you know. If you want to stay alive, you'll do well to remember it. Trent opened the door, and just like that, he was gone. Jill stared after him, her mind going a gazillion different directions. She felt like she was in some melodramatic old spy movie and had met a mysterious stranger. Laughable, and yet he just handed me several thousands of dollars worth of equipment with a straight face and told you to watch your back. You think he's kidding? She didn't know what to think, and she didn't have time to think it. The Alpha team was probably assembling, waiting, wondering where the hell she was. She shouldered the heavy bags and hurried out the door. They'd gotten the weapons loaded and secured, and Wesker was getting impatient, although his eyes were hidden by dark aviator sunglasses. Chris could see in the captain's stance the way that he kept his head cocked towards the building. The helicopter was prepped and ready, the blades whipping warm, humid air through the tight compartment. With the door open, the sound in the engine drowned out any attempt at conversation. There was nothing to do but wait. Come on, Jill. Don't slow us up here. Even Chris had thought it. Jill emerged from the building and jogged towards them with Alpha gear and an apologetic look on her face. Wesker jumped down and helped her, taking one of the stuffed bags as she climbed aboard. Wesker followed, closing the double hatch behind them, and instantly the roar of the turbine engine was muted and dulled to a thrum. Problems, Jill? Wesker didn't sound angry, but there was an edge to his voice that suggested he wasn't happy either. Jill shook her head. One of the lockers was stuck. I had a hell of a time getting the key to work. Captain stared at her for a moment as if deciding whether or not to give her a hard time, and then shrugged. I'll call maintenance when we get back. Go ahead and distribute the gear. She a liar. She lied. None of them lockers are stuck. You're just weird. He picked up a headset and put it on, moving to sit next to Brad as Jill started passing out the vest. The helicopter lifted slowly, the RPD building falling away as Brad positioned them to head northwest. East, I thought you said west. Crouched down next to Jill, after donning his vest, helping her sort through the gloves and belts as they spread over the city towards Arkley Mountains. The busy urban streets below gave way to the suburbs, wide streets, quiet houses set amidst of squares of browning grass and picket fences. An evening haze had settled over the sprawling but isolated community, fuzzing the edges of a picturesque view and giving an unreal dreamlike quality. Minutes passed in silence as the Alphas prepared themselves and belted in, each team member preoccupied with his or her own thoughts. With any luck, Bravo Team's helicopter had only suffered a minor help me, how do I read? A minor mechanical failure. Forrest would have set it down in one of the scraggly open fields that dotted the forest and was probably up to his elbows in grease by now, cursing at the engine as they waited for Alpha to show. Without the bird in working order, Marnini wouldn't start the proposed search. The alternative, Chris grimaced, not wanting to consider any alternatives. He had once seen the aftermath of a serious copter crash back in Air Force. Pilot error had led to the fall of a Huey carrying 11 men and women to a training mission. By the time the rescuers arrived, there'd been nothing but char, smoke, and bones amidst fiery debris. The sweet, sticky smell of gasoline roasted flesh heavily in the blackened air. Even the ground had been burning, and that was the image that haunted his dream for months afterwards. The earth on fire, the chemical flames devouring the very soil beneath his feet. There was a slight dip in their altitude as Brad adjusted the rotor pitch, jolting him out of his unpleasant memories. The ragged outskirts of Raccoon Forest slipped by, the orange markers of the police barricades standing out against the thick muted green of the trees. Twilight was finally setting in. Not the movie. The forest growing heavy with shadow. ETA, 3 minutes. Brad called back and Chris looked around the cabin, noting the silent, grim expression of his teammates. Joseph had tied a bandana over his head and was intently relacing his boots. Barry was gently rubbing a soft cloth over his beloved Colt python, staring out the hatch window. He turned his head to look at Jill and was surprised to find her staring back at him, thoughtfully. She was sitting on the same bench as him, and she smiled briefly, almost nervously, as he caught her gaze. Abruptly, she unhooked her belt and moved to sit next to him. He caught the faint scent of her skin, a clean, soapy smell. Chris, what you've been saying about the external factors in the case. Her voice was pitched so low that he had to lean in to hear her over the throbbing of the engine. She glanced quickly around to the others, as if to make sure no one was listening, and then looked into his eyes, her own carefully guarded. I think you might be on the right track, she said softly. And I'm starting to think it might not be such a good idea to talk about it. Chris's throat suddenly went dry. Did something happen? She shook her head, her finely chiseled features giving away nothing. No, I've just been thinking that you maybe should watch what you say. Maybe not everyone's listening on the right side of this. I can't believe she said that. Hey yo? Hey yo, are they gonna kiss or what? No, I'm kidding. Hang on, my mom's texting me. Brief pause. Okay, she needs a drink. Okay. I am gonna get up really fast. I will be 2 seconds. Hey, yo. Alright. I don't know what it is about books, but I feel like they make my hands dry. Like they suck all the life out of my hands. I've put lotion on like 3 times. I feel like they're just like... This book is physically sucking the life out of me. Yo, yo, yo. Okay. Big sip of water. Okay, so we last left off Chris and Jill about to start making out in this helicopter. Just kidding. Chris frowns. Not sure what she's trying to tell him. The only people I've talked to are on the job. Her gaze didn't falter, and he realized suddenly what she was implying. Jesus, and I thought I was paranoid. Jill, I know these people. Even if I didn't, the stars have psych profiles on every member, history checks, personal references. There's no way it could happen. She sighs. He goes, geez, I thought I was paranoid. This chick crazy. Look, forget I said anything. I just watch yourself. That's all. Alright, kids, look lively. We're coming up on Sector 22. They could have been anywhere. At Wesker's interruption, Jill gave him a final sharp glance and then moved to one of the windows. Chris followed, Joseph and Barry taking up search on the other side of the cabin. Looking out the small window, he scanned the deepening dusk on automatic. Thinking about what Jill had said, he supposed he should be grateful that he wasn't the only one who suspected some kind of cover-up. But why hadn't she said anything before? And to warn him against the stars? Oh, hi, game guy! Welcome on in. Grab a seat, grab a tea, get comfy. We are doing some reading. We're actually almost on chapter 4. I'm really proud of us. We're really booking it, doing much better than we did the first part one of this, where I read hardly anything. For those of you who are just coming in and sitting with us, I did a recap of what we read last time, which was basically character introductions and an introduction to the police case that's being investigated. And they sent out a team before our current team that we are reading, and their helicopter has crashed. We have lost contact with them. We lost signal with them. We don't know where they is no mas. So, we're currently scanning their last pinged location, and I promise you that nothing will go wrong. So everybody come on in, grab a seat, grab a tea, get comfy, and I hope that you all enjoy your stay. Also, a plug advertisement, don't forget to hit the little like button on the stream. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. It lets YouTube know I'm doing a good job. Great recap. Yeah, great recap. Woohoo. I promise next time, I keep meaning I was gonna make like a little page where we sit down and we talk about it appropriately. So, we're reading Resident Evil 1, The Umbrella Conspiracy, which is just a giant recap of the entire game of Resident Evil 1. Where they go in a little bit more in depth about the behind the scenes of the characters, their thoughts and feelings and stuff, and it's going to lead all the way up to like them going into the mansion and all that crap. So it's like, it's thick lore. If you're a big Resident Evil fan, it's thick lore in a physical book form. Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with Resident Evil, it's basically we're cops. But we're not any kind of cops. We're special cops. A special unit of cops investigating the disappearances of like 12 different people or something. And a few of them have come up dead. And so we're heading into the woods because this is where they are. So for someone who never played Resident Evil, we're police officers investigating mysterious disappearances of like 12 different people. We go into a forest. Basically, all these people go out hiking and then they never come back. Or we find a dead body. Or we find a dead body. It's a mystery. We never know what's going to happen. Epic. Yeah. Epic. Alright. Looking out the small window, he scanned the deepening dusk on automatic, thinking about what Jill had said. He supposed he should be grateful he wasn't the only one who suspected some kind of cover-up, but why hadn't she said anything before? And to warn him against the stars, she knows something. She must. It's the only explanation that made any sense. He decided after that they picked up Bravos. He talked to her again, tried to convince her that going to Wesker would be their best bet. With both of them pushing, the captain would have to listen. He stared out the seemingly endless sea of trees as the helicopter skimmed lower, forcing his full attention to the search. The Spencer estate had been close, though he didn't see it in the fading light. Thoughts of Billy, for context anybody who's new, Chris's dead friend, an umbrella, and now Jill's strange warning circled through his exhaustion, trying to break focus, but he refused to give in. He's still worried about the Bravos, which is the police team they sent in before us. Though, as the trees swept by, he was becoming more and more convinced that they weren't in any real trouble. It's probably nothing worse than a crossed wire. Forest had just shut down to make repairs. Then he saw it, less than a mile away. Even as Jill pointed and spoke, his concerns turned to cold dread. Look, Chris! An oily plume of black smoke boiled up through the last remnants of daylight, staining the sky like the promise of death. Oh no. Barry clenched his jaw, staring at the stream of smoke that rose up from the trees, feeling sick. Captain, 2 o'clock sharp, Chris called, and then they were turning, heading for the dark smudge that could only mean a crash. Wesker moved back into his cabin, still wearing his shades. He stepped to the window and spoke quietly, his voice subdued. Let's not assume the worst. There's a possibility that a fire broke out after they landed, or that they started the fire on purpose as a signal. Barry wished that they could believe him, but even Wesker had to know better. With the copter shut down, a fire starting on its own was unlikely, and if the Bravos wanted a signal, they would have used flares. Besides, wood doesn't make that kind of smoke. Whatever it is, we won't know until we get there. Now, if I can have your full attention, please. Barry turned away from the window and saw the others do the same. Chris, Jill, and Joseph all wore the same look, as he imagined he did. Shock. Stars sometimes get hurt in the line of duty. It's part of the job, but accidents like this... Wesker's only visible sign of distress was the set of his mouth, a thin, grim line against his tanned skin. Listen up. We've got people down in a possibly hostile environment. I want all of you armed, and I want an organized approach. A standard fan as soon as we sit down. Barry'll take point. Barry nodded, pulling himself together. Wesker was right. Now was not the time to get emotional. Brad's gonna set us down as close to the site as he can get. What looks like a small clearing about 50 meters south of their last coordinates. He'll stay with the copter and keep it warm in case of any trouble. Any questions? Nobody spoke, and Wesker nodded briskly. Good. Barry, load us up. We can leave the rest of the gear on board and we'll come back for it. Captain stepped to the front to talk to Brad, while Jill, Chris, and Joseph turned to Barry. As weapons specialist, he checked the firearms in and out to each STARS member and kept them in prime condition. Barry turned to the cabinet next to the outer hatch and unhooked the latch, exposing 6 Beretta 9mm. I said MM? That feels weird. That's what it says. 9 handguns on the metal rack, cleared and sighted only yesterday. Each weapon held 15 rounds. Semi-jacketed hollow points. It was a good gun, though Barry preferred his Python. It's a lot bigger punch, with the .357 rounds. He quickly distributed the weapons, passing out 3 loaded clips each. I hope we don't need these, Joseph said, slapping in a clip. Barry nodded in agreement. Just because he paid his dues to the NRA didn't mean that he was some trigger-happy swear word. Dummy. 9mm? Yeah, the 9 I was going to say millimeter, but I wasn't confident that that was the right word. And I didn't want to sound any more goober than I already do. Which you would think, me playing Rainbow Six Siege, or occasionally Call of Duty, I would know, but I don't, because I never learned to read. Hiccup. It didn't mean that he was some trigger-happy dummy looking to kill. Yeah, 9, delicious. He just liked guns. Wesker joined them again, and the 5 of them stood at the hatch, waiting for Brad to bring them in. As they neared the plume of smoke, the helicopter's whirling blades pushed it down and out, creating a black fog that blended into the heavy shadows of the trees. Any chance of spotting the downed vehicle from the air was lost to the smoke and dusk. Brad spun them around and settled the burn into a scrappy patch of tall grass, snapping wildly from the force of wind. Even as the rails wobbled to the ground, Barry had his hand on the latch, ready to move out. A warm hand fell on his shoulder. Barry turned and saw Chris looking at him intently. "We're right behind you," Chris said, and Barry nodded. He wasn't worried. Not with the Alphas backing him up, which is the current team of police officers. Yeah, imagine reading. Couldn't be me. Not me, for real, for real. All he was concerned with was the Bravo team's situation. Rico was a good friend of his. His wife had babysat for the girls many times more than Barry could count, and was friends with Kathy. The thought of him dead to a stupid mechanical screw-up. "Hang on, buddy, we're coming in." One hand on the butt of his Colt, Barry pulled the handle, stepping out into the humid, whipping twilight of Raccoon Forest, ready for anything. And with that, we are on Chapter 4. And with that, we've made it to Chapter 4. We are killing it tonight. Good reading, good reading. I see you. Read real good. So I think we could finish up this next one before we run out of stream time. Very confident. Because it's only like 4 pages. But I'm sure it has many words. And I would say we made really great progress today. All of you very cute patooties. I'm gonna take a big sip of water. And double time. No, I'm just kidding. Alright, chapter 4. They spread out and started north. Wesker and Chris behind, and to the Barry's left, Jill and Joseph on his right. Directly in front of them was a sparse stand of trees, and as the Alpha's copter blades revved down, Jill could smell burning fuel and see wisps of smoke curling through the foliage. They moved quickly through the wooded area, visibility dropping off sharply beneath the needled branches. Warm scents of pine and earth were overshadowed by a burning smell. An acrid odor growing stronger with each step. In the dim light fluttering towards them, Jill saw that there was another clearing up ahead, high with brittle grass. I see it, dead ahead. Jill felt her heart speed up at Barry's shout, and then they were all running, hurrying to catch up to their point man. She emerged from the trees, Joseph next to her. Barry was already at the down copter. Chris and Wesker right behind him. Smoke was still rising from the silent wreck, but it was thinning. If there had been a fire, it had died out. She and Joseph reached the others and stopped, staring, no one speaking as they surveyed the scene. The long, wide body of the copter was still intact, not a single scratch visible. The port landing rail looked bent, but besides that and the dying haze of smoke from the rotor, there seemed to be nothing wrong with it. The hatch stood open, the beams... the beam from Wesker's penlight showing them an undamaged cabin. From what she could see, most of the Bravo gear was still on board. So where are they? It didn't make any sense. It had been 15 minutes since their last transition. If anyone had been injured, they would have stayed. And if they decided to leave, why have they left their equipment behind? Wesker handed the light to Joseph, nodded towards the cockpit. Check it out. The rest of you spread out. Look for clues. Tracks, shell casings, signs of struggle. You find anything, let me know, and stay alert. Jill stood a moment longer, staring at the smoking copter and wondering what could have happened. Enrico had mentioned something about a malfunction, so okay, the Bravos had sit down. What had happened next? What would have made them abandon their best chance of being found? Leaving behind emergency kits, weaponry? Jill saw a couple of bullet-proof vests crumpled next to the hatch. She shook her head, adding it to the growing list of seemingly irrational actions. She turned to join the search as Joseph stepped out of the cockpit, looking confused as she felt. She waited to hear his report. He handed the light back to Wesker, shrugging nervously. I don't know what happened. The bent railings suggest a forced landing, but except for the electrical system, everything looks fine. Wesker sighed, then raised his voice so the others could hear. Circle out, people, 3 meters apart. Widen as we go. Jill moved to stand between Chris and Barry, both men already scanning the ground at their feet as they slowly walked east and northeast of the helicopter. Wesker stepped into the cabin, Probing the darkness with his penlight, Joseph headed west. Dry weeds crackle underfoot as they widen their circles. The only sound in the still warm air, except for the distant hum of the Alpha helicopter engine. Jill used her boots to search through the thick ground cover, brushing tall grass aside with each step. In another few moments it'd be too dark to see anything. They needed to break out the flashlights Bravos had left theirs behind. Jill stopped suddenly, listening. The sighing, crackling steps of others. The faraway drone of their copper. And nothing else. Not a chirp. Not a chitter. Nothing. They were in the woods. In the middle of summer. Where are all the animals? The insects? The forest was unnaturally still. The only sounds human. For the first time since they sat down, Jill was afraid. She was about to call out to the others when Joseph shouted from somewhere behind them, his voice high and crackling. "Hey, over here!" Jill turned and started jogging back, saw Chris and Barry do the same. Wesker was still by the helicopter, but he had drawn his weapon at Joseph's cry, pointing it up as he broke into a run. In the murky light, Jill could just make out Joseph's shadowy form, crouched down in the high grass near some trees. 100 feet past the copter. Instinctively, she pulled out her own sidearm and double-timed it. Suddenly overwhelmed by a sense of encroaching doom, Joseph stood up holding something and let out a strangled scream before dropping it, his eyes wide with horror. For a split second, Joel's mind couldn't accept what it had seen in Joseph's grasp. A STARS handgun. A Beretta. She ran faster, catching up to Wesker, and a disembodied human hand curled around it, hacked off at the wrist. There was a deep snarl from behind Joseph. From the darkness of the trees, an animal growling, joined by another raspy, throaty shriek. And suddenly, dark, powerful shapes erupted from the woods, lunging at Joseph and taking him down. "Joseph!" Jill screamed, ringing in his ears. Chris drew his weapon and stopped in his tracks, trying to get a clear shot at the raging beast that was attacking Joseph. Wesker's penlight sent a thin beam dancing over the writhing creatures, illuminating a nightmare. Joseph's body was all but hidden by the trees, and the 3 animals that tore him apart, gripping him with the gnashing, dripping jaws. They were the size and shape of dogs, as big as German shepherds maybe, except that they seemed to have no fur, no skin. Wet red sinew and muscle flashed beneath Wesker's waving light, the dog creatures shrieking and snapping in a frenzy of bloodlust. Joseph cried out, a burbling liquid sound as he flailed weakly at the savage attackers, blood pouring from multiple wounds. It was the scream of a dying man. There was no time to waste. Chris targeted and opened fire. 3 rounds smacked wetly into one of the dogs, and a 4th shot going high. There was a single high-pitched yelp, and the beast went down, its sides heaving. The other 2 animals continued at their assault, indifferent to the thunderous shots. Even as Chris watched in horror, one of the hellhounds lunged forward and ripped out Joseph's throat, exposing bloody gristle and the glistening slickness of bone. The stars opened up and sent a rain of explosive fire at Joseph's killers. He is very dead. The thing that baffles me, and I know they do this for dramatics, but there was a very big period there of them watching him just get eaten by like zombie doggos before they did not start firing until his throat got like ripped out, right? Like y'all were watching that happen. Not that they could have saved him, I don't think. It's kind of game over, but like they're like, and we stopped and we stared for a very long time, and then we decided to fire. I fired, and then I missed. I fired again, and I missed. Should we do something? Yeah. We should do something. Somebody do something. Help him. They all sit there and stare at each other blankly. Like a red splatters burst into the air, the dog thing still trying to get at the spasming corpse, while bullets riddled their strange flesh. With the final series of harsh, barking mules, they fell and did not rise again. Hold your fire! Chris took his finger off the trigger, but continued pointing the gun at the fallen creatures, ready to blow apart the first one that so much as twitched. Two of them were still breathing, growling softly through panting grass. The third one sprawled out lifelessly next to Joseph's mutilated body. They should be dead. Should have stayed down at the first shot. What are they? Wesker took a single step towards the slaughter in front of them, when all around, deep, echoing howls filled the warm night air, shrill voices of praetorial fury coming at the stars from all directions. Back to the copper now, Wesker shouted. Chris ran, Barry and Jill in front of him, and Wesker bringing up the rear. The four of them sprinted through the dark trees, unseen branches slapping at them as the howls grow louder and more insistent. Wesker turned and fired blindly into the woods as they stumbled towards the waiting helicopter, its blades already spinning. Chris felt relief sweep over him. Brad must have heard the shots. They still had a chance. Chris could hear the creatures behind them now, sharp rustling of lean, muscular bodies tearing through the trees. He could also see Brad's pale, wide-eyed face through the glass at the front of the copter. Reflected lights of the control panel casting a greenish glow across his panicked features. He was shouting something, but the roar of the engine drowned out everything. A blast of wind churning the fields into a rippling sea. Another 50 feet, almost there. And suddenly, the helicopter jerked into the air, accelerating wildly. Chris caught a final glimpse of Brad's face, and he could see the blind terror there, the unthinkable panic that had gripped him as he clawed at the controls. No, don't go, Chris screamed, but the wobbling rails were already out of reach. The copter pitching forward and away from them through the thundering darkness. They were going to die. Damn you, victors! Wesker turned and fired again and was rewarded with a squeal of pain from one of their pursuers. There was at least 4 more close behind, gaining on them rapidly. Keep going, he shouted, trying to get his bearings as they stumbled on, the piercing shrieks of mutant dogs urging them faster. The sound of the helicopter was dying away, the cowardly victors taking their escape with them. Wesker fired again, shot going wide, and saw another shadowy form join the hunt. The dogs were brutally fast. They didn't stand a chance unless... The mansion. Veer right, 1 o'clock! Wesker yelled, hoping that His sense of direction was still intact. They couldn't outrun the creatures, but maybe they could keep them at bay long enough to reach cover. He spun and fired the last round in his clip. Empty! Ejecting the spent magazine, he fumbled for another one tucked in his belt as both Barry and Chris took up defense, firing past him into the closing pack. Wesker slapped a fresh clip as they reached the edge of the overgrown clearing and plunged into another dark stand of trees. They stumbled and dodged through the woods, tripping on uneven ground as the killer dogs came on. Lungs aching for air, Wesker imagined that he could smell the something rotting meat stench of beast. Probably don't want to know what that word means. As they narrowed the distance and he somehow found the capacity to run faster. We should be there by now, gotta be close. Chris saw it first, though, the thinning of shadows of trees, the looming monstrosity backlit by an early moon. There, run for the house! It looked abandoned from the outside. The weathered wood and the stone of a giant mansion crumbling away in the dark. The full size of the structure was cloaked by shadowy overgrown hedges that surrounded it, isolating it from the forest. A massive outset front porch presented double doors, their only option for escape. Wesker had heard the snap of powerful jaws behind him and fired at the sound, intuitively squeezing the trigger as he ran for the front of the mansion. A gurgling yelp, the creature fell away, the howls of its siblings louder than ever, raised to a fever pitch by the thrill of the chase. Jill reached the doors first, slamming into the heavy wood with one shoulder as she snatched at the handle. Amazingly, they crashed open. Brightness spilled out across the stone steps to the porch, lighting their path. She turned and started firing, providing cover for the three gasping men, and ran through the opening in the darkness. They piled into the mansion, Jill diving in last, and Barry throwing his considerable bulk against the door, wedging it closed against the snarls of the creatures. He collapsed against it, face red and sweating, as Chris found the entry still deadbolt and slid it home. They made it. Outside, the dogs howled and scrabbled uselessly at the heavy door. Wesker took a deep breath of the cold, quiet air that filled the well-lit room and exhaled sharply. As he had already known, the Spencer's house wasn't abandoned. And now that they were here, all his careful planning was for nothing. Wesker silently cursed Brad Victors again and wondered if they were better off inside than out. Huh, that's a weird thought, Wesker. How did you know that it wasn't abandoned? How do you know if they're better off safe or not? Many questions, no answers. But as we end that chapter for today, it is also goodbye time for stream. Considerable bulk is a funny description. Yep, that is kind of a funny description. There's a lot of, I think, weirdly worded things here. Actually, there's quite a few funny hee-hee-ha-has, but this book is actually really old. This book is from like the 90s, so it's probably just how they spoke us back then. And the moral of the story is never send in the B team first. Ha ha. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. Honestly, I agree with, I think they pointed out, like, this was like a massive scale, like, thing that definitely needed, like, more than, like, two people, right? Like they needed both teams to go in at the same time. And I don't, well, okay, I kind of know why they did it. Like, I know the real reason why they didn't, but I don't know why they did it like that. Long, long, long ago in the 90s. Yeah. I mean, that's 500 years ago. You can't, you know, you have, the way that people talk or wrote back then is probably very different than how people talk and write like now, right? Like, I know you're like, oh, it couldn't have been that long ago, but like, everything has probably changed very drastically from then and now. It was actually one of the more frustrating things that I've experienced. Is I have a big age gap from my sibling whenever they went to school and they were learning um like vastly different lessons, and like he and I have completely different writing styles because of the way that we were taught in school. I don't know why there isn't like a standard thing across like all states either, but everybody very different educational programs. So I know that that sounds like a humorous statement, but it is probably true. Yeah, Team Bravo more like Team Debated. Team Debated. So, as is tradition, so it has been done, so it will be said. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for hanging out with me, and thank you for spending time with me. If you're new here and you're not already, yeah, even 10 years apart, and you're not already, here's a link to all my social media. Please work. Okay, cool. Um, Brain fart. You will not see me back here again on YouTube for our continue reading party until Friday, but I will be streaming on Twitch Monday and Tuesday. So if you want to watch me play video games, feel free to stop by there. I had a great time reading tonight, and we read 3 whole chapters, which was a lot better than what we did the other day. I hope you guys enjoyed the book. You had a great time. You had fun. I appreciate all of you for stopping by and hanging out. Thank you very much. It was an epic stream. So we will continue the book on Friday. And I promise that I'll make the stuff to do a proper recap. And I will become very prepared. Because we will have quite a bit to recap. Because I have tackled many, many chapters. So, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for spending time with me. Y'all have a good night, day, evening, whatever time it is for you. I will be putting a poll up to ask Twitter about visual novels. So if you have an opinion or if you want me to read visual novels on here, feel free to follow me on Twitter, and you'll probably see that poll very shortly. Yeah. Probably see that poll very shortly. And yeah, I will see some of you guys tomorrow on my Twitch. Have a good night. We're gonna play VR tomorrow. VR spoopy game. Woohoo!